Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 77, recorded on September 4th, 2020. It is the 34th recorded conversation with my friend Mike. We are continuing the discussion as to whether solipsism has value or can be considered a position that is possibly maintainable. And we are coming closer to agreement as we recognize the difference between belief and confidence in that belief, or the difference between accuracy of belief and the feeling of degree of certainty about that belief. We still, however, have a way to go on the path to agreement. The question about solipsism, the difference is a little bit obscure. For you, um, reality as something independent of your subjective experience does not exist. So there is your reality, my reality, and somebody else's reality. And also for solipsism, if you weren't thinking about me at 10 o'clock this morning, then I did not exist. And of course, this is an unusual way of thinking as far as normal thinking is concerned. I do not think normally either after writing the Mind Body Problem book and so forth. And but the question had one basic question is, why would you adopt the solipsistic viewpoint when, as you yourself point out, in your daily use, in your daily living or existence, you don't operate from a solipsistic viewpoint. You do assume, like I do, that there is a reality and our models of it, like my belief or our beliefs about it or our perceptions of it, can be incorrect, meaning that there is a correct version, but it is not just whatever we happen to, whatever I happen to believe or perceive. That's not necessarily a model of reality. It can be an incorrect model, of reality. So the important feature of my way of looking at things is indeed there is an external, so to speak, reality that is, and that all we can do is have models of reality that can be increasingly accurate. And the more accurate they are, the less likely we are to make mistakes. And the less likely we are to make mistakes, the less likely we are to have preventable tragedy or preventable hardship or suffering.
Yeah, I recall now. Thank you for that kind of synopsis. I recall now where we were going with this during the last discussion, and my recollection. Just let me check in. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can
when
hear.
I hold. You can hear me fine. Okay.
No, there was
my recollection.
There was a gap there.
Okay.
And there's a lot of movement, which is going to make any viewer dizzy.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to hold the camera straight. Unfortunately, I don't have the equivalent of a tripod or any place to put my phone. Let me try it. This might actually.
Well, now you're on your side.
I'm on my side from relative to you.
Mhm.
Does this work?
No, you're on your side. There you go.
Um, I will try it. The phone is somewhat shaky here. It doesn't seem very stable. I could do this. Can you still hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, yes.
Oh wait, now I can't hear you. God damn it. What I need is a wireless oh, this will work. How about this is the way we had it last time. Let me see if I can do it this way. Maybe how about does this work?
Yeah, it's okay. It's
A little
like,
weird.
yeah, you're lying down,
I'm
I
looking down at you.
guess.
What do you think? Is this way if I could eliminate the shaking? Is that preferable?
That'll work. Mhm.
Okay. I'm trying not to give myself a headache, but I'm like this. No, so yeah, so I recall what we were talking about much more so during this conversation. And just before we continue that, just a couple of things I just want to comment on about what you just said. I think that I know we were talking about this last time. I mean, as a solipsist or phenomenologist or whatever you want to call it, I don't think that that doesn't necessitate, and that doesn't mean that I say, well, reality doesn't exist outside of my subjective experience. Again, what it means is that I can't know that reality that is outside my subjective experience. So what that basically means, I guess the conclusion there is that my subjective experience and your subjective experience and everyone else's subjective experience constitutes everyone's reality. So that basically means that reality and things that we oftentimes associate with it, like truth, facts, blah blah blah, etc., are localized. That's what I call it, rather than universal. So you have truth, facts, beliefs, perceptions, all localized within one person, and that is unique. And it's local. It is unique for every person. The idea where a solipsist would differ, it doesn't necessarily mean there's not anything out there. Outside subjective experience, what it means is that the what constitutes our reality, and the only thing we can know is our subjective experience. So that's just a comment
Well,
on what we were saying.
yeah, but see, it sounds to me like you are agreeing with me
Right.
exactly, but you're using words somewhat differently, such that it makes it seem like there is disagreement.
Well, this is what we came to last time. I think at the end of the last conversation, what we started to say that, if you take out the part of solipsism, or what I would say would be, if we start talking about solipsism more accurately, which is that it doesn't deny any reality outside of subjective experience, just as it can't be known, then you and I are almost in full agreement. And you see that to be very kind of similar. And I think it's what we were talking about last time is it's everybody's solipsistic. I think if you ask anybody this, they'll say, well, yeah, that's true. I can't really know anything outside of what's in my own mind or my subjective experience, or whatever they might want to call it. And it's just a matter of, so everybody's a solipsist in that sense, but it's a matter of how far you take it. I happen to take it further than you do. And there are people that I know of in history who took even farther than I do. And there are people that we know that don't take it as far as even you. But I think, I would maintain, and we would talk about at the end of the last discussion, was everybody's solipsist. It's just a matter of degree at this point in human history.
I think that the problem here, especially for any potential viewers, is that it's very unclear what you're meaning by solipsism. And I think it has to do, the problem has to do with how we're using our basic terminology. And of course, this goes back to the Mind-Body Problem book that you and I both have read, that's available free on the Humanianity.com website. Put in the plug. That all you have is your subjective experience and your beliefs about that subjective experience. And that subjective experience is a model of reality. So our beliefs are just models of that reality. Our perceptions are models of that reality. And all that we can mean by that is the ability to predict. So if the belief is accurate, then predictions based upon it and behavior based upon it will turn out not to be mistaken. And it is important to have as accurate beliefs as possible. Same way with perceptions. So you can have a perception that is inaccurate, like an hallucination or a mirage, that does not reflect accurately reality. And the only way that you can know that is by what predictions you make on the basis of those beliefs or those perceptions.
Yeah,
but the fact that you can be wrong means that there is outside of your subjective experience something that your subjective experience may model, correspond to, or not. And so that the best term for that is reality. But the postmodern corruption of the term is to say, well, that there's my reality and there's your reality, then that is making it more consistent with, making the word reality more consistent with subjective experience or my beliefs.
Well, I know we talked about this before. I wouldn't characterize it as a corruption because of a whole bunch of things. But I think where we need to talk a little bit more about is the idea, when you talk about a model. Okay, so the first thing I'd say, and let me just comment on, Bill, the reason why I can't look at the phone is because I'm essentially, my head is basically pinned to my neck in order for me to look at you, and it's giving me a lot of neck pain.
Oh my.
So yeah, so sometimes I'll be looking up here, and then every so often I'll bring my head down.
Well, is there a better way to position?
There's no place for me to put it. I tried some other things. I could, yeah, and even like this, it doesn't go up a little bit, but I still have to put my neck all the way down. It's. I'll just switch. I just don't want you to think I'm being rude and not looking at you.
Oh no,
Okay, good. Okay. So the first thing I would say would be, you said that we make a model of of reality. Okay, so that model exists in your subjective experience. That in itself, I think, is solipsistic. I think not, it's solipsistic in nature, but I think it serves to provide an additional point of validity for a solipsist position. And if you're saying that the only thing we know is a model of reality inside our own subjective experience, a solipsist would say, yeah, that's what we're saying. That's right. You can't know. Reality cannot be known. Even and it's depending upon how solipsistic you are. If you're very solipsistic, you're going to say something like, and not only can we can't know it to the point where we can't even know for sure it exists. And other people who are less on the solipsistic scale would say, well, hold on, that's a little bit crazy. There's a lot of evidence that what I could point to that could say some kind of reality exists based on our model. It's just that model we can only know that reality based on what's our subjective experience. So that's solipsistic. Also, I think what you just said, that supports the position.
Can you then please define solipsism?
Solipsism is the idea that anything outside your subjective experience cannot be known. Period. And known. If you read the literature about solipsism a bit more carefully and just read up on it, what they're really saying is cannot be known for certain.
Well,
the actual definition of it is cannot be known, but it's really cannot be known for certain. So that means you can't know its true nature, you can't know if it really exists. The only thing you can be sure about is that things are happening inside your subjective experience. That's just that's all it means. The idea that solipsism is nihilistic or kind of denies that reality actually even exists, no. I don't, that might be somebody's interpretation of it, but I do not understand the literature about it in that way. Mm-hmm. It means that it cannot be known. Instead of, you could say, instead of speaking in the negative about it, let's speak in the positive. Solipsism says the only thing that you can know for sure is what's in your subjective experience. That would be kind of an affirmative way of saying the same thing.
One of the problems in that is the word know, K-N-O-W.
Right.
See, I think.
And what does that mean?
Yeah. It has different meanings. Usually it would refer to having accurate beliefs about. Now, again, let's make sure that, we understand, I think, how we're using the word model, but just to be sure and to be clear to others, a model is anything, the parts of which can be used to predict accurately the parts of that which is being modeled. When a rock is sitting in mud and the mud dries, and the rock somehow leaves that place and is somewhere else, then the surface of the mud is a model of the surface of the rock, and the surface of the rock is a model of the surface of the mud. And so we can, so a picture is a model of whatever the picture is of. A model car is a model of whatever car the model is of. Uh, a belief is um, a model, let's say in the brain or in the mind, of that which it is a model of. Um, a mathematical equation is a model also. And it's all of these things can be used to know something about something else that it is modeling. And so it's like when the rat is in the maze and food is to the right, and the rat learns that, then there's a model in the rat's brain of where food is to be found when in the maze. And so that would be a belief about where food is when in the maze. So we talk about subjective experience, which is a part of our developing models of our experience. Our subjective experience is a model that consists of a container inside of which is everything that you are experiencing. And so the what we since the concept of the model makes use of this idea of prediction. In other words, with the model, I can predict what. Looking at the model of this car, I can predict how far the wheels will be apart in the real car, or whatever it might be. With this mathematical equation, I can predict what will the results of measurements, what the results of measurements will be when doing the following. Now, you're indicating that this does not seem right to you. So, so maybe we're having difficulty at that point.
I think that my sense is that you're I don't really know how to say this, so I was going to say that you're not being true to your point of view by the way the way you are characterizing that scenario of the car or the rock.
Why?
Because you're saying on the one hand, because I've heard you say this, that on the one hand, the idea of behind the curtain, that what's behind the curtain cannot be known. But yet, when you talk about things in a scenario, you're making an assumption as if you can know what's behind the curtain, and you're in fact experiencing what's behind the curtain in some kind of direct way, where you can make these derivative claims and statements about them. So I think if you're going to make these scenarios, though,
That's correct. I think we should hold up here, because that's not a good characterization. In other words, behind the curtain, for those who don't know what that refers to, it's referring to a metaphor that is a metaphor of the tripartite model. And the tripartite model is that we have subjective experience and our beliefs about it. And then we increasingly develop this add-on objective experience, not objective experience, the objective model, which is our beliefs that are not obtained just from our daily experience, but instead we learn from other people who have done experiments and so forth. In other words, we learn about things like atoms and molecules and quarks and stuff like that that is not a part of our day-to-day experience, and which, however, enables more accurate predictions. And then there is reality. So there's subjective model and objective model, which are one big collection, but divisible and productively in that way. And then there is reality. And so the metaphor is of this sort, that there is a contest going on. There is a stage, a curtain across the stage, and an audience, that's us humans. And the contest is to see who can give the best answer to the question. And the question is, what's behind the curtain is reality. What is it most like? And so people say, well, I think it is like such and such. It is not the same thing as what is behind the curtain, but it is like it in that, with that saying it is like that, I can make various predictions as to what will happen if I do certain things. Okay, so therefore, and so the people outside, us humans, never get to see what's behind the curtain. It is not, it is something that is far stranger than anything we can imagine, but we can imagine things that allow for accurate predictions. And so all that we are ever doing is saying, well, I think it's like this or it's like that. And,
so, yeah, let me add on something to that metaphor. That what you just said is solipsistic, and that's why I would characterize you to be a solipsist in a very important ways. But I do think. So you're in that auditorium, and there are these people in the audience, and they're all trying to kind of guess with greater degree of accuracy what's behind the curtain.
They're proposing. They are proposing.
Right. They're proposing.
Things,
right.
No, they are proposing things that are in some way like what's behind the curtain. What that means, like, means that thinking of it that way will allow for an accurate prediction.
Right. Okay. So a solipsist would come into that room, certain solipsists. Some solipsists would come into that room and they would say, yeah, that makes total sense. I got it. And they would sit down and they would try to debate what's behind the curtain. And other solipsists would come in.
What is behind the curtain? Not what is behind the curtain, but what
guessing.
What is behind the curtain is like.
Is like, right. Very solipsist in orientation. There are other people would come into that auditorium and say, hey, I have a question. They'd raise their hand and they would say, how do you know anything's behind the curtain? You can never see it. Maybe this is all in your imagination.
Okay.
And that's what a solipsist who's further down that path would say. I'm a little further along down that path.
But the problem with that, see, is there's always a danger in using a metaphor because someone else can say, okay, we'll use that metaphor and we'll add this on or add that on. And then that can completely distort the original idea of the metaphor.
Okay, then I don't have to use a metaphor. I could just say it without the metaphor.
Well,
This metaphor.
wait.
Okay, go ahead.
So this person coming into the room saying, I don't think there's anything behind the curtain, would be saying, using my metaphor, all answers will receive the same, all of our proposals will receive the same answer. Sure, if you say so. But that's not the answers that we get. If in our lives that were so that anything we did would result in whatever we wanted to happen from that, or in fact, nothing would be predictable. And so we couldn't do anything. And there is the thing that we are faced with is that it is possible to be correct, it is possible to be incorrect, or to be
inaccurate or accurate. I thought you were done there. So
no.
Before I lose a thought, okay. Wait a minute. I lost a thought. Damn it. Okay. So here's what I think that solipsist would say in response to that. Okay, that's true. You can there's inaccurate and accurate, but you're making an assumption here. You're making an assumption that the reason why you're accurate or inaccurate has something to do with what's behind the curtain. Where it could be that the reason why you're accurate or inaccurate has to do with what's going on in your subjective experience, because that's the only thing you ever know. In fact, it's more likely to be that way.
See, the problem there is that's taking the metaphor and completely distorting it.
Then let's not say it as a metaphor. Then, when you are making that statement, you're making an assumption that the reason why you're accurate or inaccurate is because of something that is some characteristic of reality. You have not shown that. You could just as easily say that the reason why certain humans are accurate or inaccurate has to do with what's going on in their subjective experience.
Well, that may be
possible to say that.
That may be true, but that's what you just said is making the assumption that there is such a thing as accuracy, and that the meaning of accuracy is consistency with or similarity to that which is allows for accurate predictions. It is that some things are predictable, and so that if we believe something different, we will be incorrect. So that is the original function of the term reality or real. It's standing for that which exists independently of our beliefs about it or our perceptions of it. And the evidence is that we have of that is that we can be wrong and we can be right. We can predict.
Let's move away from the analogy there and get more specifics and get more, actually concrete in terms of actual examples. So I do think, it's possible to argue successfully that even something as, well, let me just say, I think it's possible to argue convincingly enough where a group of people would question, you know, whether going to the moon, whether those equations really serve that purpose, or if whether it's something that's characteristic of reality versus a characteristic of something just in human collective experience. I'm not one of them, and that's going down the path of solipsism to the point where I won't go personally, but nonetheless,
But
I think as a solipsist, as anybody,
I didn't
what,
follow.
what
I did not follow that.
I think because everything happens in your subjective experience, including things like equations that help us go to the moon and our experience of going to the moon. There are people out there that can argue convincingly enough that, we could be inside of some kind of computer generated world and we never really went to the moon. That argument, even though I don't agree with it, technically, it's possible. The point is, it can't be proven that they are incorrect. Now, that doesn't necessarily, that's not a position I would take. That's very far down along the solipsist path, so to speak. I'm nowhere near close to that. Neither are you, and neither are most people. But the important point that I think the implication is a lot of people who are less far down, less completely convinced of a solipsistic point of view, fail to use a very important word when they talk about things. That they fail to use the word I think, maybe, perhaps. And that is one area that is very troublesome for me. And I think one of the benefits you talked about in the beginning of this conversation of solipsism, that of being further down the solipsistic path, where you can say these equations get us to the moon, probably. That there's probably, I think, if I was to really kind of characterize my solipsist position, go ahead.
Well, see, I think the issue that you're addressing now is entirely separate, and that is the question of the confidence that one has in one's beliefs, and also the ability or tendency to devote any energy to questioning those beliefs. In other words, a person can say, well, the moon landing was a fake, and they may be very confident about that, or they may say, well, that's what I think, and I'm pretty convinced of it, or that's what I tend to think. In other words, given any belief, there is the degree of confidence that one has in that belief, which can be expressed also in terms of probability. In other words, that this is almost certainly so, or probably so, or somewhat likely, something like that. given a particular belief. But the issue of the confidence that one has in one's belief is a separate area, separate concept than the concept of what the belief itself is.
I disagree
being
completely.
a model, being a model. There's one
If
has the model, but there's also the degree of confidence that one has in the model. That's like that's a different concept, a different entity.
I don't agree. Well, there might be different entities, but there's a very, very close relationship between how you orient yourself to understanding reality, whether or not it's something external to your subjective experience versus something that's primarily in your subjective experience. One orientation will promote a feeling of righteousness, which can lead to a desire to dominate, black and white thinking, et cetera, all kinds of other problems,
Of course.
of course. And the other orientation would do the exact opposite, lead one to doubt oneself, lead one to doubt more things, to doubt, which would lead to humility, which leads to a predilection to hear what other people have to say. Doesn't mean that the other orientation can't do that. It means the other orientation is vastly less likely to promote that kind of response in humans.
See, I agree with that, but that is entirely separate from what we were talking about the nature of belief, or the concept of this as to whether there is a reality such that a belief can be correct or incorrect. So a belief can be correct or incorrect, or somewhere in the middle. Also, a person can have a lot of confidence or a little confidence, or somewhere in the middle. Those are two separate things.
So the first thing that strikes me is how are you using the word belief here? Let me just start there. How are you using the word belief?
Okay, well, that's one of the most fundamental, basic concepts and terms in all of this. So a belief is you look like you were already in
disagreement. Because I'm still formulating what I'm saying, but when you
so
like you and like other people, I'm thinking about what I just said, that I just don't, when you play it out on the surface, what I just said is reasonable, but when you play it out and think about it, I was wrong. It's just not true.
So you were asking me about what belief was, and I got...
I'm sorry, I got distracted. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you were not actually focused on what I was saying.
At that time, I wasn't. I was kind of rethinking what I was saying and the conclusions I was coming to. It just was wrong. But anyway, please continue about beliefs.
Yeah, so it looked like you were disagreeing with me before I'd even said,
No, I was disagreeing with myself. I was like critiquing myself. I shouldn't have said that. That's not true.
Yeah.
Like you, it's just like, and like most people, I'm kind of seduced by the way I experience things. But when you really think about it and think it through, my daily experience does not necessitate in any way the existence of reality. It just doesn't. I wish it did, because it would make things make more sense. But anyway, let's talk about beliefs. That other topic gives me a headache.
Your daily your daily existence does not include the idea that there is a reality. In other words, anything you believed could be correct. Anything that you did could result in anything at all.
Yeah, yes. As contrary as that sounds, even to me, if I think it through in a very technical, detailed, analytical way, that becomes possible.
I don't think
And
so.
to me, it's so antithetical to the way I experience things. It's disturbing.
Yeah,
But
well,
at the final analysis, that's what I come to all the time.
yeah, but I think there's a problem there. And it would be good to try to identify what the problem is. See, the problem, of course, is that in trying to answer the question, how are you using the word belief? What do you mean by it? As soon as a person would start to answer that, there would be terms being used that had not yet been defined. And then if you tried to define those terms, you would come up with other terms that were not yet defined and so on. So it's something that has to be kind of approached in a gradually increasing degree of understanding, something like that. But so if we take any animal that engages in behavior, where we would say that the animal behaves in a certain way, that behavior is in response to whatever environment the animal is in at that particular point. And so therefore, we would say, if we're using just a standard scientific or usual objective model understanding of things, that in that animal's brain, there was an arrangement of enhanced synaptic potentials, or connections, I should say, that were would be activated that reflected things about the environment, things that were actually there being perceived, and things that were predicted to be so, such that whatever the animal does, it is based upon a belief as to what will happen if it does that. Now, this doesn't mean that it's conscious, and it doesn't mean it's in words. But for us humans, it's anything that we do is based upon our belief as to what will happen if we do it. And that is, we assume that that is in some way coordinated with, in the physical model, what is true in the brain, or if we use the mental model, what is true in the mind. So there is in the mind or the brain a model of that which exists, and it can be accurate or inaccurate. And it can be fairly accurate or somewhat accurate.
Right.
And so everything you're doing moment by moment, every single thing is based upon a belief as to what will happen if you do it.
Right. I think, like you, I like most people, my daily experience and what I assume is happening without this technical talk is very similar. It's what you just said, very similar to what you just said. But that doesn't negate the possibility and the existence of people who don't have that orientation during their daily experience that we have. And in fact, what happens inside their brain, happens inside their subjective experience, is their reality. And it could be completely radically different than mine. I think about people who
Wait. See, you introduced the term reality with an entirely different meaning than the meaning that you and I both have been using just a little bit earlier in the conversation. And it was
but that's my point.
You are now defining reality as that which a person believes rather than
No, that's not how it was. But that, to a certain degree, that's my point. And there's an implication there that when you and I, well, there's a lot of things I can say about this. Let me continue. This will come around, I think, full circle, and you'll get my point. There are people that doesn't, like I was saying, it doesn't negate the possibility or the existence of people who, for whatever reason, their conclusions about what reality is radically different. Whether or not it's a schizophrenic, psychopath, sociopath, or regular person, it's radically different. And I don't think it's possible to say that these people, when they say reality is functioning like X, and we're saying no, reality is functioning as Y, there is no way objectively to negate one versus the other, because both of those.
But there is.
No, it's not, because it's not. It's not about accuracy or inaccuracy at all. Not at all.
Wait, please. There is a way, and it's what we know about in general, and it's what we've specialized in the sciences, and that is if it is not consistent with reality, we get predictions that do not turn out to be what actually happens.
But the accuracy of that statement is a function of a subjective belief. That's my whole point. If you go back to the 15th century and say that to somebody, they're going to even forget that. If you went back to the 15th century and tried to, communicate to people the accuracy of that, it would be nonsense. It would be like, you're completely wrong. It's God's will. That's for those people inside of their subjective experience. That's what was happening. So in order for what you just said to be accurate, you have to believe it. And it's in your subjective experience, which makes you no different than the schizophrenic. It's just that your beliefs coincide with mine and most people's subjective experience.
No. It's more than that. It's just like everybody can believe that the earth is flat, but when you actually do experiments and so forth, such that if the earth is flat, then you'll get one set of results, and if it's round, you'll get another set of results. It turns out that one of the beliefs is wrong.
That is glancing over some very, very fancy footwork that happens inside your subjective experience. you have to interpret the data. You have to believe in the accuracy of the data. You have to um, agree with other people. Have to come to the same agreement with you, which might reinforce your belief. It's absolutely entirely possible. I mean, my point is, all of that is happening in your subjective experience. It's nothing to do with what's happening outside your subjective experience at all. And I can't get past that. See, that's the part I can't get past ever. The only philosopher I've ever heard, and I've talked about this before, I just want to say it again. The only argument I've ever heard that was convincing of the refutation to refute what I just said, the part that I can't get over, was a philosopher that said, you can't ever get over that, Mike. There's no way you're going to get over that, but it doesn't matter because you can't live that way. So just ignore it. And to me, that was a cop-out. I think the philosopher really answered the question.
The reason that you can't live that way is because there are right answers and wrong answers. And if every time you do something, what you thought was going to happen turns out to be something different, and even maybe something awful, then you can't live that way. So
you can't live that way, but you don't have to necessarily make the assumption and live according to the assumption that what's happening that there's something happening outside your subjective experience. That fundamentally is a delusion that is widespread. It's somebody like you who believes the world is round. I'm going to make an analogy. It seems to everybody that, if you look outside, the world's flat. You have to really think about it and do an analysis. And it's so contrary to our daily thinking that the world is actually round that you just don't live that way. You just don't live that way. And it's the same thing. It's analogous to this idea of the existence of a reality outside your subjective experience. It seems so real that that's the way it is, but when you really think about it, I can't get past that. I can't get past everything happens, even the interpretation of scientific data. Everything happens in your subjective experience. That is super critical, and is a point whose significance can't be underestimated, I think.
But there's not a question that for you, everything that you experience is your subjective experience, but it is still possible for you to be incorrect.
Yes, but how does the possibility of being incorrect necessitate something outside my subjective experience?
By definition, that's what incorrect means.
But and this is what we talked about before. The definitions happen inside your subjective experience. I know
we're talking now about the process of developing a definition. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that when you're saying that you can be wrong, it implies that there is a right. It implies that there is predictability, and if you are wrong, your predictions will result in you doing things and experiencing things that are different than what you predicted.
Well, now for me, when I think that through, when I think analytically, what that means, you can say, is that there is probably something outside my subjective experience. You can't say that there is. It goes back to what I was saying early in this discussion, this idea of humility. I can say there probably is. There could be, most likely, but to say there definitely is a huge exaggeration.
you believe you can be wrong about something? Do you believe you can believe something and it be wrong?
Correct. But
That, that,
it's still happening in
what
my subjective experience.
does that mean? What does it
It,
mean that it's wrong?
I know you're going to be very critical of this, so let me really formulate what it is. I think I said this before. I had said this before. To be inaccurate in the way that I'm talking about it means that the expectation that I had in my subjective experience about what would happen didn't happen. That is the more accurate statement of what is going on.
Say it again.
Not I was wrong about what was happening outside my subjective experience. I got new data that proved me to be inaccurate.
Say it again, please.
To be inaccurate means that the expectation that I had in my subjective experience was wrong. Didn't happen. Not wrong, it didn't happen. The expectation that I had in my subjective experience didn't happen in my subjective experience. It's more accurate in terms of what's really happening.
But we're talking about your prediction as to what will happen if you do this, that, or the other, for example.
Right.
Can you be incorrect about it?
Yes.
What does that mean?
I just told you. It means what I expected to happen in my subjective experience didn't come to fruition in my subjective experience.
Okay. What about, is it possible to be accurate?
Yes, and that means that what I expected to happen in my subjective experience did come to fruition.
Okay.
In my subjective experience.
So what you expected to happen can either be right or wrong.
You're using this implicit idea, and I know it's a habit because I do it also in my normal daily life. You're making you're using the idea implicitly when you say right or wrong that there is some kind of reality outside your subjective experience that is the ideal that you can be accurate or inaccurate against.
Yes.
You haven't made, that's an assumption. All I'm saying is that's an assumption.
It's the meaning of the word right and wrong.
So what? We've gone through this before.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't for the entirety of philosophical conversations, philosophers have been taking a closer look about how the common use of words are defined and saying, well, it's not really, reality is not really that, truth is not really that, belief is not really that. So what? That's not how it's defined. The definition is not accurate. It's somewhat accurate, not completely accurate.
But there's the possibility of accuracy.
That's what I said. There's a possibility. It's possible. What I said before, I said, you can say it's probable. You can even say it's probable that something exists outside your subjective experience. You just can't say it's definite there is something outside your subjective experience.
Not what we were talking about. There's a little bit of a shifting. I know that you're trying to make a point with regard to the solipsistic position that the extreme of which is that the only thing that exists is whatever your subjective experience is. Am I correct on that? That's the.
I think the only that would I think that's an extreme solipsist position. The only thing that exists that implies that reality does that anything outside your subjective experience does not exist.
Yeah. Okay. Now, do you believe that?
No.
Okay.
The problem that I have with that statement is it's kind of violates a solipsistic perspective. The idea of say it does not exist with that degree of confidence is inappropriate. It's possible that it may not exist. I'll go that far as to say that. But in my opinion, it's more probable that something exists out there of your subjective experience, most likely. But I can't say definitely for sure of what it is, or even if it's really out there, it's probable.
Well, what it is, remember, is not something that is knowable. All we can know is whether our models of it are such that they can predict successfully what will happen. Um, it's um, it's like again the cartoon image that there's let's say a lamp and two people looking at it in the cartoon, and over the head of each individual is a balloon, and in it is a lamp. And so that balloon over each person's head is their perception of the lamp. Now,
Right.
hold on.
Oh no, that was my neck. My neck
Okay.
is killing me. Go ahead. I'm just gonna look up.
So each balloon contains a lamp. We, looking at the cartoon, see three lamps. So we see
Right.
the lamp that they are looking at, but the way that a lamp appears in the balloon over the head of each of those people um, is that light presumably bounces off the lamp and travels into the eyes of the individual. Well, already there has been a change from the lamp itself to light waves, and then those are converted into nerve impulses and so forth. So if we think that that has any value, looking at it that way, then the lamp, there is nothing about the lamp, the actual lamp that we are looking at, that is like, that is the same as what's in the balloon over each person's head. And so that lamp that we, looking at the cartoon, see them looking at is something that neither of them can in any way experience. They can only experience a model of, a perception of something.
Right.
And
And that model
it's got,
exists inside their balloon.
yes.
Right. That's my point. That's what I can't get over. That's the point that I can't get past. If everything happens in your subjective experience, it is definitively impossible to prove, even through inductive or inferential reasoning, that anything exists out your subjective experience. It's definitively impossible. You can say it's likely, it's probable, most likely, probable, but you can't say definitely. So, and I can't get past that point.
I think in a sense that you can, in that what we have found is that there is the possibility of accurate prediction, and
I think so. Yeah. That
that
happens to not be convincing for me.
of accurate uh, of accurate prediction and uh, non-accurate prediction, successful prediction and unsuccessful prediction. Um, but the fact is that there is predictability. So that predictability is one of the most essential and basic um, elements of experience that tells us that indeed we can be right, we can be wrong, that there is an external reality, and we need to try to develop models that are increasingly accurate of that reality. Even though we cannot experience the reality, we can just experience our models of it.
Yeah, and this is a huge difference, and this is, I think, what makes me more solipsistic than you are. I think I don't subscribe to the idea that the ability to be inaccurate or accurate in a really detailed technical analysis implies the existence of something outside your subjective experience. It probably does. It might, perhaps. It sounds reasonable.
Why would it not? What would be the reason for believing that it would not?
Well, why believe the Earth is not flat? Seems flat to me. I mean, why should I believe that?
Well, I'm not saying.
It's that, but okay, but that was a bad analogy. Why not believe it? Because there's no evidence that it's true or false. I can't know it. I mean, that's why.
There is evidence. Predictability is the evidence.
Predictability. I think you're making a huge leap by saying, because I can I think you're making a huge leap by saying, because I predict X and Y happens, that means there's something outside my subjective experience. I think that's a huge leap.
No, that's not the only thing. It's that one can indeed, and most frequently does, make accurate predictions.
Even there.
Otherwise, if we're saying that there's no ability to predict anything at all, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't. Life would not be the way it would be. You could not do anything.
Well, even there, I can say the same thing. I think you're making a huge leap by saying, just because I can predict something and it happens, that implies the existence of something outside my subjective experience. And as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about.
The problem, though, is that it is the enormity of that. In other words, it's not just an issue of chance that
Right.
What you predict happens. It is almost always true that when you do stuff, your prediction as to what's going to happen is what actually happens. I think that you rolled down or rolled up your window. Is that right?
No.
Oh, there was something.
No, he's he's having some problems. He's shaking, so I'm trying to calm him down.
Okay, then we'll use that. Then see, you had the belief that if you reached out to your right, you would feel this furry thing, the dog. And you also had the belief that your rubbing it would calm the dog down.
Right.
Those are your beliefs. And if
that in no way, that's a huge leap to say that implies that anything is happening outside my subjective experience. It's a huge leap.
It is saying that you, for the most part, can predict what's going to happen. And
well, let me be more specific about it. Yeah, you're right. I suggest we use a more specific. I can predict what will happen in my subjective experience very accurately most of the time.
Okay, that predictability implies that your subjective experience is an accurate model of something that exists. But the fact that you could make a mistake and it shows that indeed it is not just your subjective experience, but that there is the possibility of making mistakes and of correcting the mistakes and so forth.
Right. I like what you use. Yeah, I liked what you use when you use the word implies. I agree. It implies something. It doesn't guarantee something. That's the only thing the only point I think I'm making here. That it doesn't guarantee. It doesn't necessitate. It implies. It makes it probable. But yeah, I know this kind of sound crazy, especially with like movies like The Matrix and how it's used colloquially. But yeah, I'm thinking about virtual reality as I'm talking about this. And, in 300 years, considering, that civilization doesn't destroy itself, it really might be possible to hook an infant up to a virtual reality system and create a world that has completely different physics than ours has, or 500 years or 700, whatever time it's going to take. Eventually, it's going to happen. That you got to ask yourself, is that infant experiencing, what constitutes reality for that infant as they become an adult?
But the part of that metaphor or of that idea is that there are people hooking the infant up to something that works predictably. So it again does not eliminate the idea that predictability and the ability to make mistakes means that there is a reality that one's models can be accurate models of or inaccurate models of.
Well, my argument, my counter to that is, yes, that's true if you're looking at it from our point of view. If you're looking at it from the point of view of the infant, where their senses, that's all that they've ever, that this data from this artificial world is all that's ever been fed to them, I would say quite the opposite. I think that infant, and if you hook up a whole bunch of infants, when they get to be older, some of them will be sitting down, like you and I are having conversations about whether or not what's happening, whether there is something outside their subjective experience or not. Now, from our point of view, that we know we hook.
But there would be.
Right. No, I would disagree. From their
No, not from their point of view or their beliefs, but in actuality, according to the scenario that you described, there were us humans that hooked the infants up to these machines.
That's not my point. But that's exactly not my point. My point is
I understand that the infants will not know about it.
No. It's not that they don't. But what's the implication of them not know? The implication of them not knowing about it, they can't know about it. And what they constitute as reality is a data stream that's being it's just what's happening inside of their brains, inside of their mind, inside their subjective experience. That's all there is.
Yeah, but
we know because we can imagine that, well, we're really feeding them a data stream, but that's not what's happening in their minds, in their subjective experience.
They could come to the belief that they were hooked up to some technology that was produced by these other beings, namely us.
Right, but right, and that reality, there is no reality outside that data stream.
And that
they could argue.
And that would be a more accurate belief that they had.
But the salient point of that, yes, absolutely, in that scenario and in that analogy. But the salient point and the point that I'm trying to make is that what constitutes reality and what constitutes someone's belief entirely happens inside their subjective experience,
It
as
depends.
shown by those infants.
It depends upon how you use the term reality.
Well, I think if you want to use the term reality colloquially and just continue with the illusion, I would argue that there is definitely something out there outside our subjective experience. I think that's definitely delusional. To say there is definitely something outside your subjective experience, that's delusional. Yeah, I mean that's an easy way to talk. But if you want to talk more succinctly, and I would argue more accurately, you have to start using the words probably, maybe, perhaps.
Well,
It implies, there's an implication.
but it's what, see, just for instance, in your use of the term out there.
5:33. I gotta go soon, but go ahead.
Okay.
Just like 5-minute warning. I'm already late. Go ahead.
When you use the term out there and use the term subjective experience, that's something that is never observed. So it is a model that you're constructing that says that there is a boundary inside of which is everything that you experience. And then that model, if it has a boundary, means that there's something on the other side of the boundary. And
well, let me comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that if there's a boundary, the implication that there's something beyond the boundary is just simply an artifact of logic or common human experience that is not necessarily true.
It's the meaning of the idea of a boundary.
Okay, well, if you want to go there, you could go there. Let's use some. There are ideas in mathematics, certainly, which also exist in your subjective experience, that imply there is nothing else there is no boundary. The idea of the infinite, infinity, the universe, eternity, those ideas imply no boundary. So just because you can create an artificial boundary around something doesn't mean there's anything other than that necessarily. Well, it could be that the subjective experience is all there is. Similar to the idea of the universe.
Those are good examples, but what they're examples of is our ability to make to use words well, I'm not sure about what I'm saying here. I'm dealing with the issue of like infinity. That is a good point. We never deal with infinity. Well, I'm not sure that I could maintain that. It depends upon how the word infinity is being used. And that's always true of all of these words that we use. They can be used in different ways. Um, but um, but as you are using it, you're saying that there is a boundary, and out there, outside of the boundary, exists either nothing or something. But that, uh, so it's the idea of a container. And of course, we use the model of a
Right.
container because everything seems to be kind of in a container. So it's a very helpful kind of concept that
Right. And I can go with that if you want. I mean, that's okay. So it's just what I'm saying is, kind of, you're right. I would, I would go so far as to say the idea of that boundary seems to imply something else. And that's just all again, and I've heard you say the same thing. It implies. I agree with you. It implies. I just think that you are more willing. This is the real difference between our points of view. I think you're much more willing to characterize. It's to take the implication of what's true in terms of something outside your subjective experience as enough evidence to actually declare there is something out there beside your subjective experience.
I'm
And
not sure that I followed that.
well, I've heard you say before, there is an implication that there's something behind the curtain. For you, the evidence is enough to declare there is something out behind the curtain. For me,
evidence? What is that evidence?
the fact that you can, one of the things you cite many times is the idea of predictions and models, and you can be accurate or inaccurate. You say to yourself, that is enough.
You said that's one. Is there something else that I've said?
You may have others. That's the one I'm most familiar with.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know. Do you have others? That's one I know of.
I don't think I have others. I'm
Okay.
trying to be as specific, precise as possible.
Right. See, and for me, we both agree there. This implies the fact that we can be accurate versus inaccurate certainly implies something.
What?
For you, it implies that there is something outside our subjective experience. And I'm just not willing to go there yet. And the reason why I can't go there is because, and maybe we should talk about this next time, is because the predictions and the accuracy, the idea of being accurate versus inaccurate, still happens inside our subjective experience. So I can't use that to imply something other than your subjective happening in subjective experience. In the real final, in this kind of detailed analysis, I think that is the only, we're really narrowing this down. That's the only place we disagree, I think.
And I would say it's the meaning of that one can be accurate or inaccurate, and that
Right.
almost all the time we're being accurate, but we can be inaccurate and make mistakes. That's
Right.
the meaning. That's a basic way of looking at things that I do. It, to not think that way would be to say that, whether you were successful or not would be completely random about everything you did.
And so I think this idea of meaning makes something right. You take that to mean something, and I take that to mean something else. And I think we should look at that.
Yeah, what do you take it to mean?
Just very quickly, I take that to mean that when you're inaccurate, it's saying something about your subjective experience. It's not saying anything about something that's outside your subjective experience. That's the real difference.
And
That's the only difference, I think.
And what I'm saying is that that's the meaning of inaccurate.
Well, say it again. So what?
Mm-hmm.
I think that you're assuming characteristics in the definition of accurate, inaccurate, reality, and all these other words to support a colloquial view of these concepts that are, it might be true, it might be accurate, might be reflective of the way things are, but not necessarily so. But on that note, let's remember to do that. Let's take, because I think we made a huge amount of progress today. I really think that the real area that where we disagree on is whether or not we both agree that the fact that you could be inaccurate or accurate implies something. I think that you think it implies one thing and I think it implies something else, and we should really flesh that out next time. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, Bill.
Oh,
I will talk to you next week, my friend. Have a good one.
thank you. You too.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can